Before I introduce you to my next guest today, I want to make sure that you're aware of a training and coaching resource to help you increase your productivity, clarify your purpose, and improve your communication skills. It's called the Next Level Coaching and Leadership with Purpose programs. To learn more, simply go to warrenwandling.com, and under the programs tab, you'll find both of those resources. Again, that's WARRENWANDLING.com. Now, on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of How to Become an Obstacle Buster. I'm your host, Warren Wandling, the show that's dedicated helping leaders and entrepreneurs to overcome their obstacles, build resilience, and achieve success. And I have a phenomenal guest to help us do just that, Chad E. Foster. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thanks, Warren. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. You are considered a trailblazer, defining limitations with resilience and innovation. Despite going blind at 21, you considered a rainmaker, billion-dollar generator, tech innovator, graduated as the first blind executive from Harvard Business School's leadership program, and you created a software program, a CRM software program for virtually impaired, doing what tech titans said couldn't be done. Tell our audience a little more about your background.
Yeah, so there's a nice little summary there. But yeah, the net of it is I went blind from an inherited eye disease at 21 years old. It was the hidden family eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. I grew up, I was able to see, played sports, drove a car, all the things. And then when I was in college, my eyesight really faded out and I had to reset and figure out what I was going to do next. So I went from being into the pre-med field, wanted to be in the medicine field and do something helping people. And then after I went blind, honestly, I wasn't even sure how I was going to be able to help myself. So I ended up switching my major to business, lost about 3 years of university work at that time. Who knew back then when I was in the depths of despair that I would end up being a happier, more successful human being after going blind than before.
Well, that's really a fascinating story in reference to your ability. It's certainly about resilience. I'm sure there's a lot of depth of stories in reference to how you were able to overcome those challenges to be able to achieve the level of success in business and in life that you did.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that goes into that. And I break down now as a professional keynote speaker and leadership coach. I help people understand the anatomy of resilience. And so there are a lot of thought leaders out there who'll talk about resilience and the need to be more resilient. But what I tend to hear more often than not are platitudes. People are talking about, hey, try harder and don't give up. And those are byproducts of resilience, but they're not all that helpful when you're in the middle of the change curve or having to deal with an obstacle that seems insurmountable. So what I do is I break down the anatomy of resilience so people can learn how to shift their mindset so that they can think differently about how to attach themselves to a given situation so that they can adapt and they can emerge better off than before. And they can shift their mindset from being a victim of circumstances to being a visionary, able to navigate circumstances. And the motivation and inspiration comes from inside of them because of how they choose to think about those situations. And so I have the 5 pillars of resilience that I like to talk about when I'm giving a keynote presentation. I break down all of my storytelling around those 5 pillars.
So that's really fascinating. So within the 5 pillars, is there one pillar that you can share with our audience that would give them greater insight to be able to be more resilient?
Yeah, I might even just do a quick synopsis on all 5, if that's all
Sure.
right,
Yeah,
just to
that'd be
help people
perfect.
understand the framework. And obviously, I'd like to flesh all these out if we have the long format. I have a lot of stories that reinforce these points, but the framework itself is the number one thing that you have to do is learn how to choose your response. So none of us in life get to choose all the cards that were dealt. You didn't get to choose your circumstances, Warren. I didn't get to choose mine. Some of mine are favorable, some of mine are not. But at the end of the day, I have to learn how to play the cards that I'm dealt. So you don't get to choose your cards, but you get to choose how you play your cards. And so that's the first and foremost pillar. The second one of my favorites, if I had to pick one, is you have to learn how to tell yourself the right stories. Now, the fact of the matter is, I went blind at 21 years old, and I could have sat around and chosen to tell myself that I went blind because I've got terrible luck. Or I could choose to tell myself that I went blind because I'm one of the very few people on this planet who has the strength and the toughness to overcome that and use it to help other people. Now, technically, both of these stories can be true, where one of these stories paints me as a victim. But the second story, the better story, is a Jedi mind trick that transforms my disability into my strength. It reframes my perceived weakness as a strength. And this allows me to really navigate my situation, my surroundings, my blindness with greater purpose, optimism, and meaning. And so we all become our stories. So you have to make sure you choose your stories wisely. And that's true for personal and professional endeavors. Now, the third pillar is visualize your greatness. And sometimes we have to do this in unfavorable circumstances. I had to figure out how to make blind look good. Now, I know that's a little tongue in cheek, but it's so true because if I can never reimagine greatness in my unchangeable reality of being blind, how can I ever move towards acceptance? And the fact of the matter is, I couldn't. So we have to reimagine our visions of greatness for ourselves in a way that's bold enough to inspire us to take action, but it's anchored to the reality of our unchangeable circumstances. And this fourth pillar is where mindset meets actions. I mentioned in the previous pillar, inspiring us to take action by having a bold vision of greatness. Now, when we want to take action, we have to make sure that we do the fourth pillar, and that is get comfortable with discomfort. And that's because life begins outside of our comfort zones. Quite simply, if you are never getting outside of your comfort zone, then you're not growing. Comfort zones are complacency. Growth never happens inside of a comfort zone. So it's important that as leaders, our teams, our organizations, our cultures are built for getting people comfortable with discomfort so that they can grow, so that they can experiment, so that they can innovate and continue to evolve and grow. And the fifth and final pillar is take advantage of your disadvantages. And the net of this one is every perceived disadvantage comes with some advantage if we can look at it in the right context. And so there are certain things that my blindness gives me an advantage to do. And I explore those in keynotes and offer examples, both practical, personal, as well as professional examples of how that's true. So that's a short little synopsis of each of the five. We can obviously click down on any of those you want, or however you'd like to explore moving forward.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that framework, Chad. I think that gives greater depth for our listeners to know what to explore around resilience. But when you're working with clients, what do you find is their greatest obstacle that you encounter?
Well, I'd say probably the single greatest obstacle that, I think it's adapting to change. And people people tend to get comfortable in the way things have been done, and whether that change is, maybe it's new ways of doing business with the pandemic that hit several years ago. Maybe it's virtual working arrangements that became a byproduct of COVID-19, where people were used to meeting face to face. Maybe it was travel being shut down, or now we're hearing a lot. It's AI and generative AI and how it's disrupting things. And before that, it was digital marketing, and just all it's changed. The only constant we have really is change, and change is coming at us like never before. The way that we're seeing things in the business landscape evolve, whether it's technological innovation, just talked about AI, digital marketing, 5G, the way things have been moving, it's not only making it different for consumers, but keeping up with that and how businesses can identify opportunities in the disruptions that are taking place. You have to be pretty clear eyed and comfortable with change to see these changes as opportunities. You know, a lot of legacy players in the business space see change as disruption, but there's great opportunity in that change. There's an opportunity to innovate and find new business models and new ways to monetize and go to market. You know, you may be a company that's made your money by flying people from point A to point B as an airline. Whereas in the future, you may have new revenue streams from the services that you're going to sell electronically to your passengers on your plane. So there are new revenue streams that can be unlocked if you have the clarity and the right way of thinking about how to approach a given situation. So a lot of it really does boil down to dealing with change, not having the anxiety related to change, but seeing the opportunities that can arise from the change, which gets back to the pillars of resilience that I talk about, whether it's, you know, telling yourself the right stories about the changes that are coming, visualizing the greatness in the changes that are coming, identifying the opportunities, taking advantage of your disadvantages, and then really leaning into that discomfort.
So as you're building your business, obviously very successful in different angles within the business world, what do you think contributed to your success in that process?
Hmm. What contributed to my success in that process? I think what helped me the most is I was able to identify the linkage between my purpose that connected with me at a deep visceral level and some areas where I've got some talent in a way that I can differentiate my brand in a way where I can remain true and authentic to who I am. I can be unapologetically authentic to who I am in a way that is true to me but is differentiated in the marketplace, doing something where I've got some talent. But I think maybe first and foremost is an area where I've got a lot of passion, and it's because it's my purpose. And when I was at Harvard Business School, I was studying with Bill George there. So, Bill George, for those who don't know, is the former chairman and chief executive officer of Medtronic, and they are the world's largest medical supply company. He was CEO there and chairman for 10 years. And in the 10 years he was there, he took their market capitalization from 1 billion to 60 billion, 60 billion in just 10 years. And so obviously a phenomenal leader. And he decided after 10 years that he was going to kind of go figure out what he wanted to do next. He wanted to step aside and let someone else take the reins. He thought 10 years was enough time. Pretty remarkable when you think about the age that we live in, where a lot of people just want to ride that until the wheels fall off. But Bill knew it was good to let other people take the lead there. And so he started teaching at Harvard Business School. And I'm studying there with Bill, and he's talking about how to find your true north. He teaches the True North Leadership Framework. He has books out by the same title. And he talks about moments in your life that affected you at a deeply emotional level, particularly in your formative years when you're growing up, and how those can shape you and help you triangulate on your true north. And as he was talking in class and we were reading the book and going through the exercises, it struck me profoundly that I had never really done anything with the loss of my eyesight. I had always just been trying to get to my next goal, winning the next deal, helping the company increase profits and growth and all that. And people would tell me from time to time that I had inspired them, but I never really took any of that seriously. I wasn't trying to inspire anybody. I was just trying to do what I had to do to get to the next goal in my life and the next objective for the company. But it really reached up and smacked me in the face during my time there. And there were others in my class. One guy in particular started a company called Trust the Doctor when we were there. I'll give you another example. His mom had cancer when he was young, and they could not find the right oncologist to help her, and she passed. And that affected him at a deeply emotional level. And so he traded in his banker job in his prime to start a company called Trusted Doctor, which allows him to connect cancer patients with the right oncologist using a video platform. And so that was his true north. And so when you find your true north, whether it's speaking, giving keynotes, coaching people based on the lessons that I've learned about the anatomy of resilience, or if it's connecting cancer patients to the right oncologist because you had a personal tragedy in your life because of that, it's not just the job, Warren. It becomes a reason for being on the planet. It is your mission in life. And there are times when the road gets really, really difficult, whether it's you're starting a business, you're trying to get it over the hump, you're trying to get through the first 3 to 5 years, and it's really, really hard. And if you're going after it just for the money, you're probably not going to have enough determination to make it happen. Maybe you will. Chances are you probably won't. But if you're doing it because you deep down inside of you believe it's what you're meant to do, you believe that you went blind because you're supposed to help other people with the lessons that you learned and that you're equipped to do it. You're uniquely equipped to help people because of what you've been through, or you believe that you can turn your tragedy of losing your mom into helping other people avoid that same fate. It lands with you at such a deeply emotional level that you've got this seemingly endless reservoir of energy. And so when you can connect that purpose to this, the talent that you've got, and then link that to a way to sort of monetize and commercialize a business model in a way that's authentic to who you are and is differentiated in your marketplace. For me, that's where the recipe lies, and I think that's what contributed to my success.
Yeah, that's really very insightful, Chad, reference to your purpose. Being able to really to connect with it, obviously you can hear it resonate within your voice and passion. Sometimes I find with the clients that I work with around purpose, they pull back because of the time invested that it takes to do that hard work, really connecting with their purpose. When you're working with clients around purpose, do you ever get pushback because of the time and effort it takes to do the hard work?
Occasionally, yeah, occasionally. And you just, you can't overstate how important it is, whether you're, at a conference giving a keynote presentation to 5,000 people, you're working one-on-one with the leader, or you're just trying to build a relationship with, excuse me, an individual that you're leading, you're managing, being able to connect with them on that level, because I don't really care who you are. Like, you get a promotion, you get more money, all that stuff feels good, but it wanes pretty quickly. That new promotion, that new raise, that new whatever will feel great for 3 6 months, pick a time frame, but over time it starts to lose its luster. What does not lose its luster is that emotional connection, that purpose, that passion for the mission. And if you can connect with that, whether that's your own company that you're leading and why you're leading it, or if it's your employees that you're trying to connect to the mission, helping them understand how what they do affects people, affects the mission of what it is that you're accomplishing as an organization, that pays dividends, because then people get really connected to why you're doing what you're doing. And then they're not as, the money and the promotions, they're kind of transactional. Yeah, they're good motivators, but they don't have the lasting power of that purpose connection that you can create with people.
So I'm curious, what do you consider as the top strategy cultivating a growth mindset?
I'll probably get comfortable with discomfort. I mean, honestly, I think and that's why I got into, I think honestly for me, I have lived so much of my life outside of my comfort zone that I've just started to seek it out. And maybe that's why I've been as successful as I've been, is because so much of my life has been uncomfortable, whether it's learning the limitations of my eyesight at a very young age, bumping into things physically, going to the hospital so much that they started to question both my parents and I in separate rooms, whether or not they were abusing me, the emotional discomfort of realizing that I couldn't see well in poorly lit conditions, or going blind in college, having to not drive a car at night, and then eventually having to stop driving. And socially, all of that was uncomfortable. And then getting a guide dog to lead me around, and walking into a university classroom, and later on a conference room or interview room with a guide dog, all of that was really uncomfortable up front. But over time, I started to get so comfortable with the uncomfortable that I would board a plane to go to Singapore by myself, just me and my guide dog, for a speaking gig or for work. I've flown all over the world by myself, not being able to see, and still would get up at 5 a.m. in the morning to try and find the hotel gym to get my workout in and try and find the piece of equipment that I needed in the gym at 5 a.m. to do what I wanted to do. And eventually learned how to downhill ski totally blind at 38 years old, where I now regularly ski black diamond and sometimes even double black diamond terrain. And I think it's because I like to continually push my comfort zone, because the more I push my comfort zone, the more it expands, and the more I'm expanding as I do that. And so recently at 45 years old, I thought it'd be good to take up the martial art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, where I'm now a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and even compete in combat sports tournaments, obviously with people who can see. So I just think that on the other side of discomfort is growth. And as hard as it is to get used to, once you start getting used to it, you start to crave it, and it starts to become this self-fulfilling prophecy where the more you lean in, the more you expand, and the more growth you experience, and the more discomfort you seek out. And I found that in jiu-jitsu particularly as well, just looking for that discomfort so that I can be more clear-minded when the discomfort comes in, because when you're in a when you're in a fight, your opponent's job is to make you uncomfortable, to inflict physical pain on you so that you are uncomfortable. And it's hard to think clearly when you're dealing with that physical pain. But the more you lay in the physical pain, the more you get used to the physical pain, the less it bothers you. More clearly you can think, and you can find ways out of bad situations because of that clarity of thought.
Well, that's really impressive, Chad, in reference to from a mindset perspective. So, if there's a listener that wants to be able to really live outside their comfort zone, what mindset strategy would you share with them to be able to tap into that same space that you just shared?
I'd say start small. I think starting too big can be discouraging. I would start small, small discomforts. For some people, it might be asking somebody at work out for coffee. It might be talking about a difficult topic with somebody. It might be something physical, like I've talked about with skiing, or going to your first yoga or martial arts class. It could be any of that. But I'd say, while I advocate a bold vision of greatness that's very inspiring, that moves us to take action, your first few steps outside of your comfort zone should not be all that bold. In fact, I'd say being too bold can be counterproductive. Start small and teach your brain that you are capable of more than you're giving yourself credit for. Because the more you just slightly edge outside of your comfort zones, the more you start to learn that, hey, it's not as scary or as bad as I thought it was. And maybe I can do this. And that tends to build up over time. And as it does, you gain more and more confidence to continue to stretch yourself. And before you know it, you'll look back and see how far you've come. If you improve just 1% in a week, you'll improve 68% in a year, and over a 10-year period, over 17,000%. It's a compound interest on incremental progress. So just those baby steps outside of your comfort zone can really pay big dividends over time.
So, peak performance is a topic that we discuss on this show. What would you say would be important in reference to be able to set and be able to achieve goals from a peak performance perspective?
I'd say set your goals higher than you think you can achieve. And you'll be surprised at just how much you can accomplish. When I was in the middle of my big change curve going blind in college, there's no way that I could have ever imagined being where I'm at today. If you had told me back then, Warren, that I'd get to go to Harvard Business School and, be able to be a successful corporate guy and have a career and write code to make software work that Oracle couldn't figure out how to do, I would have laughed at you. There's no way I could have imagined that. And to be where I'm at now and doing the things, whether it's skiing or jiu-jitsu or speaking, and the book that I published 3 years ago in partnership with HarperCollins, there's no way I could have ever imagined any of that. I just didn't think it was possible. So what I learned throughout that process is I am capable of more than what I was giving myself credit for. And I suspect the same is true for you. And so set your goals higher than you think you can achieve, and you'll be surprised. You just might exceed those goals that you're setting for yourself that you think are too high.
So around goal setting, you mentioned, I think one of your pillars is visualization. How do you integrate visualization into goal setting?
Well, I think visualization to me is, what does your vision of greatness look like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? How does it feel? Like, really paint a vivid imagery of what success looks like, and that can be the ultimate sort of goal, and that goal will evolve over time. I do think my vision has evolved over time. At first, it was to be a successful business person, and then that changed to helping people with the lessons that I've learned along the way, and then giving a keynote and writing a book and all those things. But I think goal setting are the milestones that you need in order to move along towards the vision of greatness that you have for yourself. And so, going back to my situation, if I wanted to be a successful business person, that was my initial vision after I went blind. Next goal was to finish school. I had to switch my major. I had to relearn how to learn. I was a visual learner, which was not all that helpful when I was totally blind. So I had to relearn how to learn. And it turns out I was actually a better blind student than sighted student, ironically enough. I made straight A's in the dean's list for the first time after I went blind. And it's because I had to absorb everything that I was reading. I couldn't just memorize it. I had to consume it and metabolize it and internalize it. And so I did that, made straight A's throughout all of my business courses at the University of Tennessee doing my undergrad, listened to recorded lectures twice, listened to the book twice, made better grades. So then had to get a job, got a job with a top consulting firm at Anderson Consulting. And so I broke down each of the milestones into things that I could control, things that were inside my sphere of influence. There were things that were outside my sphere of influence, like the fact that I was blind. So that meant that I'd have to relearn how to learn. And then I got a job, and then I had to teach myself how to write code to engineer software just so that I could do my job. That was hard to do without being able to see my computer screen, but that was possible because of the technology that existed. And so that was a goal of mine, was to learn how to write code so that I can engineer my software so that I didn't have to rely on anybody else to make things work for me. And so that goal became a reality. And then I started a company based upon that and bought our first vacation home with the company that I started doing that. And so all these goals sort of led up to that vision of greatness that I had. And then my vision changed, of course, over time, as it hopefully does for everybody, what you expect of yourself, because you realize your vision and then you realize, wait, maybe there's more that I could do. And so then it was, how do I give a 60 to 90-minute keynote presentation? How do I lead a workshop? How do I coach somebody through a difficult leadership challenge? And all that can be accomplished with enough effort, focus, and determination.
So I believe success leaves clues, and one of those clues are the books that successful people have read along the way. So what are some authors or books that have really impacted your life?
Yeah, I'll go back to Bill George, True North. That definitely put me on the path that I'm on. Really enjoyed Viktor Frankl's book as well, Man's Search for Meaning. Great book. I don't know if those who are familiar with Viktor Frankl, Austrian-born psychologist. Yeah,
Phenomenal book.
very very good book. Obviously, the Stephen Covey books were impactful coming out of college as well, and that sort of inspired me to eventually to get to the point where, after going through Bill George's class, writing my own book. But yeah, there were several people, and then obviously being inspired by what Tony Coelho did. He endorsed my book too. Tony Coelho was the chief sponsor and author of the Americans with Disabilities Act, making things possible for those of us with disabilities and making sure that we have the civil rights to do things like to take my service dog anywhere I need to go because of that piece of civil rights legislation. So there are lots of people who inspired me along the way. Maybe the most inspiring person along the way for me was my mom, because when I went blind in college, we didn't have any service for me to get my books in a format that I could consume. So my mom literally read every single college business book to audio cassette for me. And you want to get motivated, have somebody go outside of their comfort zone and read just weeks and weeks and weeks on end books to tape for you. You can't let them down. When somebody moves beyond themselves like that in sacrifice of you, you can't let them down. And so that was really inspiring for me, and it really inspired me to move beyond myself in service of other people, which is what I'm doing today.
Wow, that is really inspirational. I mean, that's the level of commitment. I can see why that would make an impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And she did get honored with the Accomplished Alumni Award. They gave that to me, and they gave her one on an honorary basis as well from the University of Tennessee. I felt it was only fitting. She probably read those books more carefully than a lot of my classmates.
I'm sure. So, what does the future hold? Any special projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I've got a lot of speaking this year, a lot of speaking opportunities, workshops and things. But I've got some interesting opportunities as well in the media space, working on a series with PBS, and they are looking to capture some film of us doing some skydiving beneath the Arctic Circle, climbing some mountains, and maybe even doing some heli skiing. So there's some pretty fun stuff out in the works, which should be a lot of fun. So little different there, you know, some of the things that you don't get to see all the time being, you know, in a hotel or a convention center. It'll be fun to experiment a little bit and get outside of my comfort zone a little bit and do some of those things. I've never skydived before, but I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I've never heli skied before either. So it should be interesting. We'll see what happens when a blind guy jumps out of a helicopter to ski down some backcountry.
Yes, and you know what's that's a great insight, right? In reference to the embracing, stepping outside of your comfort zone, you definitely have the right mindset in reference to do that and to be able to embrace it.
Well, I'm not telling people to do anything that I don't do myself. You know, the first time I competed in a combat sports tournament, I'm not going to lie to you, I was terrified. I was scared. I knew that those guys in those tournaments are trying to rip your arm off and take it home with them. And that's just how it goes. You know, nobody's trying to hurt you per se, but they don't care if you get hurt. And knowing that I was a baby blue belt in there, and I just had my blue belt for about 4 or 5 months, and some of those guys I've been training for just over, what was it, a year at that point, a year and 5, 6 months, and many of those guys have been training for 5, 6 years, a lot more experience. I was scared going into that, but I knew that's exactly why I needed to do it. I needed to do it because I was scared, because I know on the other side of fear is growth. You know, fear is sort of pointing me in the right direction. Yes, I need to have a healthy respect for what I'm getting into. I need to make sure that I stay safe and I'm smart and I don't take on undue risk, but at the same time, if I've taken the precautions, sometimes you have to lean in, and so that's what I did then. And I can't say that I won the tournament. I cannot say that, but I can say that I beat the person in the mirror. You know, I didn't beat the opponent on the mat, but I beat the person in the mirror, which is my fiercest opponent oftentimes. It's, you know, beating the version of me that I was yesterday. Am I a better person today than I was yesterday? So rather than comparing me to the person across the mat or the person on Instagram who's putting up their best lives, or, you know, this culture of comparisonitis that we have, I like to compare me to who I was yesterday or 6 months ago or 24 months ago. And am I a better person than I was? And if the answer to that continues to be yes, then I know I'm on the right path.
Yeah, I love that perspective, making sure that you're beating the person in the mirror because that changes the your story that you talk about in the pillars of moving forward to the next challenge that's in front of you.
Absolutely.
So I know our listeners are going to want to connect with you. So what's the best way for them to be able to reach out?
Yeah, go to my website. I've got a page for you all. It's chadefoster.com/OB. And from there, they can find all my social media handles. There's the book. They can find the book there on my website, where they can either buy it from me, they can buy it from Amazon or Barnes and Noble or on Audible or Kindle format, whatever format they prefer. They can see some of my videos, my keynote speaking videos. All that's there on my website, along with all my social media links.
Well, perfect, Chad. I'll make sure that that link is in the show notes.
Beautiful. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing your strategies, techniques, and your inspiration, really helping our listeners to be able to overcome their obstacles so they can achieve success.
Beautiful. Glad to do it. Thanks for the conversation, Warren.
Yeah, thank you. Well, until next time, this is your host, Warren Wandling, saying be an obstacle buster and be resilient.